I'll come right out and say it. I sold over half my collection to be able to buy this watch, so I've called this episode a keep or sell, but if it's a sell, I've made a pretty big mistake here. Let's get into the video. Now, to begin with, what I will say is that I do want to talk about what stayed and what went from my collection, but I'll do that in a separate video that I'm planning for when this channel hits the 1000 subscriber milestone. A little bit behind the scenes here, I actually started writing this script a long way in advance, and I'm now rushing to try and get this out before the channel hits 1000 subs. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone for all the support with all the videos that I've put out so far. For full transparency on my Black Bay 54 that you're going to see in this video, it's second hand, bought through eBay, and I think because of all the sales I also did on eBay in order to be able to afford this, they gave me a 10% discount on any watch that I purchased over the £2,000 mark. While second-hand, it's still clearly a fairly big investment of disposable income, and if you look online for this model, you'll find a mixed bag of divided opinions when it comes to reviews. So while my opinion is highly unlikely to be the definitive deal breaker for anybody, I do hope that it serves to help you, the audience, in some way, shape or form, even if that just be some nice shots of a pretty watch and some informative chat. I want to start with the ancestral heritage of the 54. It's not like we're going to have to go too far back to begin with, but I just want to mention the Black Bay range for a moment and give my perspective. Starting with the Black Bay itself, which launched in 2012, it's an attractive watch for sure, but for me it's always been hindered by my first consideration when it comes to buying a watch, and that is its dimensions. I always say that my target range is 36 to 40mm in terms of diameter, and so the 41mm Black Bay falls just foul of that, but 1mm isn't exactly the big deal here. Really, it's the thickness that I have a problem with. At 13.6mm thick, the watch is very slab-sided, and that was always enough to put me off ever considering a purchase. In 2018, the Black Bay 58 launched. The same crisp styling with a smaller size at 39mm and 11.9mm thick. An improvement from my perspective for sure, but still not quite enough to get me fully interested given the high, at least for me, price point. Finally, in 2013, along came the focus for this video, the Black Bay 54. And while the dimensions are not the only change, 37mm in diameter and 11.2mm thick is absolutely in my wheelhouse. I just think that smaller watches look better on my wrist. Aesthetically and mechanically, they feel more refined to wear. I've tried to put together a little on-wrist comparison here for you to see what I mean. Smaller watches just suit me better, and it's for that reason that I've essentially sold off everything in my collection that's over 40mm. Up until this purchase, the go-to dive watch in my collection was the 38mm Christopher Ward Trident Pro 300, a watch I cannot and will not fault, that punches well beyond its price point, but on wrist just doesn't feel as special as the Tudor. I think in large part this comes down to my three favourite features of the watch. These are the snowflake hands, the dome crystal, and the gold trim that features on the dial. Let's start with those snowflake hands. These have been a Tudor design staple since the late 1960s. The aim of the handset is to provide maximum legibility, providing a big surface area for lume to make the watch easier to read in dark underwater conditions. For me, I just like the aesthetic of them, and since Tudor have been a lot more proactive in protecting their trademark hands recently, if you like them too, you're only going to find them on a Tudor. As I mentioned, the whole point is legibility, and I've taken these shots in chronological order over the space of 15 minutes. Hopefully they speak for themselves. They're hardly taken under pitch black conditions, and the lume is insane, easily the strongest I have in my collection. For the other two features I mentioned, we have to look at the inspiration for the Black Bay 54, the Tudor Submariner reference 7922 from, you guessed it, 1954. It's quite clear where the gilt effect came from when looking back at this model, and indeed the dome crystal. What I have to say here though is that I haven't had an on-wrist experience quite like it. The two features in combination give such a premium feel when you look at the watch to check the time. I'm normally not a fan of gold at all, but when it's used in a really sparing way like this, my word, it looks good. In fact, the entire vintage aesthetic absolutely oozes class. While I am clearly biased, this is a watch I purchased after all, I do want to try and highlight some issues that people have with this model. While I've been waxing lyrical about the size, for people with a larger wrist, clearly this is not the watch for you. Fans of the red triangle around the loom pip on the bezel from the Black Bay 58 are also going to be disappointed, but as the Tudor sub didn't have it, nor does the Black Bay 54. There are also those who do not like the fake rivets on the side of the 3-link Oyster bracelet, and given that the 5-link bracelet is not an option on the 54, that either leaves an aftermarket replacement or the rubber strap as alternatives. Personally, I think the rivets do a pretty good job of creating some uniformity with the pins, and if nothing else, they do fit into the dive theme of the watch, real or otherwise, but I can appreciate they aren't going to be to everyone's tastes. What I will say for the bracelet is comfort and fit wise, it's excellent. The on-the-fly adjustment system pretty much guarantees a fantastic wearing experience, but for the sake of parity, I have seen a few complaints about the system slipping on some watches. It isn't an issue I've faced, but something to consider. Perhaps the biggest issue that people might have with the model is something that's traditionally been aimed at Tudor throughout its existence, simply that the brand is a poor man's Rolex. Now, while it's quite hard to get away from that argument, what I would say, for me at least, is that it's Tudor and not Rolex that are releasing models that I actually want in recent years. Even if I take price out of the equation, the vintage inspiration being used for the modern Tudor lineup is preferable to me. Whereas with Rolex, I don't really like the Mercedes handset, the ridiculous authorised dealer system, or the gaudy diamond encrusted watches they showed off recently at Watches and Wonders. Over the past few years, it's really only the 1908 model that I really like from the brand, and if we slip price back into the equation, I've no hope of ever owning one. Whereas with Tudor, clearly I'm a fan of the 54, but I also like the classic styling of the 1926, the Black Bay Pro, which makes even better use of the snowflake hands, but there's also the Ranger to consider, and the titanium Pelagos to boot. So yes, a poor man's Rolex, but from my eye at least, the poor man has better taste. Not only that, but they're actually available to buy. Let's take a moment to discuss the movement that you get with the Black Bay 54. You get the in-house manufactured caliber MT 5400, which is COSC certified. Essentially, that means it's been checked by the Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute to certify its accuracy and precision fall within a stringent set of parameters. I'll add that it's for that reason that I'm not taking my case back off, as I don't want to get any dust or particulates in there and necessitate or speed up the need for a costly service or adjustment. Now, I can't speak for whether or not a COSC certification means anything to you as a buyer, but it should at least give you reassurance that the movement is going to be accurate and reliable. The deviation range here is -2 to +4 seconds a day, and given that I'm usually happy with the NH34 models that have a range between -20 and +40 seconds a day, for me and my collection, this is a significant step up. Not only that, but it packs a 70-hour power reserve, which, while not quite Powermatic 80 levels, is more than enough to keep this watch ticking and in time over the weekend. I would quickly flag up that I know some people would argue the caliber is not in-house, but much like the COSC certification, it's really down to you whether or not you feel that warrants any merit in your considerations as to who owns what and what qualifies as something as being in-house. For me, I only really care that the movement is really good, so I won't dwell on that here. Long-time viewers of the channel will know of my love for the 12 from Christopher Ward. I've made 3 videos about it, and it's going to go down as one of my all-time favourite watches. Don't panic, I'm not about to go off on another ramble about it here, but I wanted to give some brief context, because the Black Bay 54 is the first watch that has dethroned the 12 as my daily driver, and for me that is high praise indeed. One reason for trimming down my collection was simply that a lot of the watches were getting no wrist time at all, and so the fact that what I've consolidated them for is seeing daily wear makes it feel like I made the right call. This is the first time that I've ever actually sold off any of my collection, and I thought I was going to miss them, but for now at least, the Tudor has more than plugged the gaps that they left behind. I'd add though that I don't regret any of the watches I've purchased. They're all part of a journey in my mind, and while there are certainly missteps and mistakes along the way, ultimately my taste becomes more and more refined, and I learn what it is that I truly value and what I want the most from a timepiece. So, I'm pleased to conclude that I absolutely will be keeping the Black Bay 54, and it's going to be a firm foundation in my collection moving forwards. Unlike some of the other keep or sell videos that I've produced, where I feel like there's been some recency bias on my part and my opinion changes as the watch is no longer my most recent purchase, I've actually owned this 54 for a few months now, as I wanted to take my time with this review, so I feel a lot more confident that it's here to stay, and hopefully in the very long run become something that, because of its tasteful sizing, I can hand down to my daughter. I really hope that the extra production value I've tried to incorporate into this video is obvious enough. Regardless of the views this video might garner, I really wanted to feel like I've done this watch justice visually. But if there are any rough edges, apologies. I did rush to finish as I wanted to get this video out before the channel hits the 1000 sub marker. I don't normally comment on when and where I film my videos beyond leaving location tags, but I would just add that Porto is an absolutely beautiful city for anyone who hasn't been. I filmed a couple of other videos there too, so it will feature as a location on the channel again soon. For anyone who has made it to the very end of the video, I just want to take the time to thank you for your ongoing support on the channel. The number of views, likes and subscribers, while modest compared to big channels, is so much more than I ever thought possible when I started this one. Feel free to stick around for more videos. The sale of over half my collection was enough to fund more than just the Black Bay, so there are a few other keep or sell videos in the pipeline, and I'm going to be making some more budget limited lists, as I've really enjoyed those too. So hopefully a fair bit to look forward to on the channel. Thanks again for your time.